The leader of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Kim Jong Un, travels to Beijing for what could be a new chapter in relations with China. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. Kim's visit to China marks the fourth time the leader of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea has traveled to Beijing in the past 10 months. Chinese President Xi Jinping and First Lady Peng Liyuan welcomed Kim and his wife to Beijing on Tuesday. The two discussed China-DPRK relations and agreed to advance efforts on the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. Kim's visit comes days after he expressed frustration with Washington over the lack of progress in negotiations since the Singapore summit with U.S. President Donald Trump. U.S. and DPRK officials are reportedly discussing a possible second summit. For more on China-DPRK relations and the Korean peninsula, let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Shanghai is Qinduo Xu. He's a political analyst and senior fellow with the Pangoal Institution. Here in the studio is Myung-koo Kang. He's a professor of political science at Baruch College with City University of New York. From Dallas, Merrill Matthews is a resident scholar with the Institute for Policy Innovation, and Becker is an analyst and commentator on U.S. DPRK relations based right here in Washington, D.C. Thanks to all of you for being with us. Qinduo, let me start with you. So Kim Jong Un has held another meeting with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. What do we know about this meeting?
Well, the meeting seems to me like it has focused on two parts. One part is really about the bilateral relationship between North Korea and China. So obviously this visit has again enforced, strengthened the bilateral ties. We know which was damaged, to a large degree because of the nuclear test and missile test by North Korean side. But since the dialogue, since the let's say the relationship getting better between North Korea and the U.S. So China-North Korean relationship are also on the rise. And the other part is really about the North Korean nuclear issue because we are expecting a second summit between Kim and President Trump. So it's like a practice, before the dialogue, and Kim came to Beijing to have some strategic exchanges with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping about what he's going to do, about how plans to handle Donald Trump, plans to do for the next step.
Myung-koo Kang, what do you make of this meeting? I mean, is something moving here? Are we seeing some progress in these negotiations?
I guess so, definitely. First of all, the summit meeting reaffirming the special relations between the two countries, China and North Korea. I mean, this year is the 70th anniversary of these two countries established the relationship. And as we know well, these two countries' relationship beyond conventional military allies. So it's beyond the economic, cultural, and other historical common grounds they share. And another important thing, as Qinduo pointed out, that this summit meeting highlighted the North Korean recommitment to denuclearization, but at the same time, they delivered a signal, the message that relevant sides should take into account reasonable concerns of North Korea more seriously. It means that some partial lift of sanctions, the possibility, so reciprocal steps from the U.S. side in response to the North Korean commitment or some bold measures for denuclearization. In a sense, they deliver such kind of message to the United States.
Now, Myung-koo Kang, Kim Jong Un has also held meetings with the South Korean leader, Moon Jae-in.
Right.
What have those meetings achieved so far?
The basic thing is that peaceful coexistence is very important for the interest of both Koreas. I mean, many skeptics, here in the United States and conservative groups in South Korea, they are skeptical about the complete denuclearization of North Korea, whether the North Korean regime is fully committed for complete irreversible denuclearization. But what we need to take into account is that this denuclearization process will be a long process. So we should be more patient, and then making a peaceful coexistence at first is very, very important. And I think the summit meetings between the two Koreas so far has achieved that peaceful coexistence, and peace can be the foundation of prosperity for both Koreas.
Brian, Kim Jong Un made a New Year's speech. In that speech, he issued a warning to the United States. Let's watch.
I
am always ready to sit down again with the U.S. president at any time and will make efforts to produce an outcome that the international community would welcome. However, if the U.S. miscalculates our people's patience, force sanctions upon us, and pursues sanctions and pressure without keeping a promise it made in front of the world, we will have no option but to explore a new path in order to protect our sovereignty and achieve peace on the Korean Peninsula.
So, Brian, what do you make of those sentiments, especially Kim Jong Un talking of a new path?
Well, let's put those comments in context. I read that speech again today. It's the 28-page version that I read. It's at the very, very end. Most of the speech is about inter-Korean relations. It's about reconciliation between North and South. There's a great deal about economic progress and the focus on economic development for North Korea. But at the very end, and in a very limited way, Kim Jong Un says to the U.S. government, look, we've taken actions. We've taken unilateral actions to show good faith on our part following the Singapore summit. But now, if all we get in return is more sanctions, more bullying, yes, we'll have to reconsider. Now, the U.S. media treated this as a great act of bellicosity on the part of Kim Jong Un. It's really a gentle reminder we won't be bullied, we won't be pushed around, our knees are not trembling. So I think the U.S. establishment, if it wants to have a peace deal with North Korea, should listen to it. That's the big question. Does the U.S. establishment actually, with the exception of Donald Trump, want a peace deal? Kim Jong Un is going out of his way. That speech was a peace offering. It was an olive branch. That's the one statement that says, look, we can go in a different way if you don't treat us with respect, if you don't treat us as equals. But I think the U.S. government should listen. Here's a historic moment, a historic opportunity. The Koreans, North and South and overseas, want this. The policy change has to come here in Washington.
Merrill Matthews, what do you make of that? Is it now up to the United States to respond to what Kim Jong Un said in that New Year's message?
Well, it's not often that I take Kim Jong Un's position over the American media or the White House, but in this case, I think he's absolutely right. It's one of the problems with Donald Trump and his administration is they tend to initiate things, get a lot of fanfare, and then they seem to drop the ball frequently and just don't move forward on things. So I think I was glad to see that Kim Jong Un did that in his speech because the administration needs to move forward. What I understand is that they would like the U.S. to move forward on declaring an end to the Korean War, which seems to me like a no-brainer, but they've had trouble doing that so far in the administration.
Merrill, there was that meeting, talking about lots of fanfare, there was that meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong Un in Singapore last June. What came of that meeting? I mean, what kind of net result do we see after that?
It's a good question because initially there was a sense of we're moving forward on this, but it doesn't seem like the administration has followed through, and I think that's the problem. As far as we know, because we don't know the details of it, Kim Jong Un wanted us to start scaling back our forces in South Korea and in the Pacific and wanted us to declare an end to that war. And we haven't made much progress that, I think in part because, as I understand from the administration, they're reluctant to start scaling back those forces until they see some denuclearization efforts from Kim Jong Un. But one of the things that's happened is we haven't been seeing the missiles flying lately. Donald Trump has touted that as one of the successes of the administration. I haven't seen much from the U.S. yet.
Qinduo Xu, of course, the nuclear issue is the big issue on the Korean Peninsula. The China's Foreign Ministry spokesman, Lu Kang, has been talking about that particular issue in the context of that meeting between President Xi Jinping and Kim Jong Un. This is what Lu Kang had to say.
With the joint efforts by the two countries, China-DPRK relations opened a new historic chapter in 2018. The two sides demonstrated the strong vitality of China-DPRK friendship via practical actions and manifested the firm commitment of the two countries to the political settlement of the Korean Peninsula issue.
So, Qinduo, on that nuclear issue, I mean, China's position is a nuclear-free Korean peninsula. To what extent was anything achieved at the meeting between the two leaders?
Well, I think during this visit, China also showed Mr. Kang to a CTM factory in southeastern part of Beijing. Just like a previous visit, the Chinese side has been patient, showing him that you can open your country and do the necessary reform. You can achieve economic prosperity at the same time maintaining political stability, and that your country will not be affected, your rule will not be affected, even you open your country. So, but of course, there are conditions that is like the UN sanctions that has to be lifted. So if you want to lift those sanctions, of course, on North Korean side, this is the pressure. They should do what's necessary. At the same time, there's a major player, United States, for North Korea. Yes, the seems from what we have seen since last year, they are ready to move forward. But at the same time, they expect some response, let's say corresponding steps from the U.S. side. For example, scaling down of the U.S. troops in the Korean Peninsula, or joint statement to declare the end of the war, or making some efforts to normalize their relationship. I think they need some encouragement. They need some incentive to move forward to damage or destroy more of the nuclear facilities, and in addition to the halting of those tests, but also to destroy more and more of the facilities over there.
Myung-koo Kang, what is your view on that? I mean, does Kim Jong Un have a point when he says, look, we had a deal, I'm keeping to my side of the bargain, now it's up to you?
I mean, basically, Kim Jong Un wants to, doesn't want to stop the ongoing negotiation or diplomatic, deal with the United States. But at the same time, what we have to remember is that if the current ongoing diplomatic negotiation disrupts or stops, every involving countries will lose more as a result of the disruption or complete stop of the diplomatic negotiations. And from the address, Kim Jong Un's New Year address, what is important? Many people don't appreciate, North Korean leaders' commitment, but he made it quite clear. For the first time, the deal leader made it quite clear North Korea will stop, end the nuclear program, and will end the spread of nuclear technology to other countries. So such kind of, deal leaders, the leaders, commitment, strong commitment, and he wanted to make a kind of breakthrough through this, summit meeting with President Trump. But at the same time, what we have to remember is that American side, domestic politics can be a really risky factor in the coming month, because as we know well, in 1994, U.S. government, Clinton administration made an agreement with North Korea, but 2 weeks later, there was a midterm election and Republican Party took over the Congress. And after that, Republican Party did not support any, money toward North Korea. So some similar thing can happen, even after some kind of substantial agreement between, President Trump and then Kim Jong Un in the coming second summit meeting. But whether it can be successfully implemented in the end, I think that is quite questionable, and that is very important, question. Even North Korea is quite seriously thinking about at the moment.
Brian, is that a big risk here in the United States that domestic politics could get in the way of some kind of deal?
Domestic politics are in the way. If it wasn't for domestic politics, we'd have a peace treaty, we'd have a peace agreement. This was 65 years ago that the war ended. 65 years. Every war has a beginning. This war doesn't seem to have an end. Why not? World War II came to an end. World War I came to an end. Isn't it time to end this war? It's only at this moment domestic politics that are the roadblock. When Trump and Kim Jong Un met on June 12th at the Singapore summit, they signed the Singapore Agreement. It has 4 points. Number one, let's have a peaceful relations between the two countries, normalization. Number two, let's set up an instrument of peace on the Korean Peninsula. It's only number 3 where it gets to denuclearization, the commitment. And then number 4 is the returning remains from prisoners who were missing in action during the Korean War. What the North Koreans want right now is point number 1 to be implemented. Right. Point number 1 is the way to get started to get to point number 2 and 3. If the U.S. says, let's have the end of the Korean War, either by a peace agreement or a peace treaty or some declaration, we're on the road.
Okay. Merrill, there is talk of another meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong Un, a second summit. Will something else have to happen before that summit takes place, or is it going to be, what, another photo op?
I suspect it'll be a photo op. I doubt much else happens in between now and then. Even though, and the interesting thing here, it doesn't seem to me that if politics are playing a role here, it doesn't seem to me the normal sort of things, because you've got conservatives and even some war hawks who generally were supportive of the president's meeting with Kim Jong Un, but you have the more pacifist and those who oppose that sort of raising the human rights issue. And my sense is they're going to have to get past North Korea's past human rights challenges to move forward, and he's going to have some pullback on that, but that's not really his constituency that's pulling back on the human rights issue. Donald Trump hasn't been the big human rights person there. Right. So you've got some different alignments here in the politics.
Okay, we are going to take a break right now. Next, the latest on the U.S.-China trade dispute after both sides met this week in Beijing. Stay with us, you're watching The Heat.